welcome to Knit with Hannah. I'm Hannah. I'm here with another knitting basics video, and today we're talking about fixing knitting mistakes and the mindset you need to fix them. Hi, welcome to Knit with Hannah. I'm Hannah. I'm here with Knitting Natter to help you learn to knit the easy way. Yes, let's make knitting easy, and let's make fixing mistakes easy as well. And that all does start with the mindset. But of course we need practical solutions as well. So I do have some videos if you'd like to watch those, if you need to watch those at any point. There's the drop stitch videos, and there's of course last week's video about putting stitches back on your needles as well. And there will be a video coming up soon all about unpicking your knitting one stitch at a time. This can sometimes be called tinking, because tink is knit backwards. I love that kind of word because, of course, Hannah is a palindrome and tink knit is a palindrome as well. So let's get to the mindset of fixing mistakes. You have the practical solutions, but they won't help at all if you panic. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, is that everything goes wrong and you just screw it up in a ball, throw it across the room, or just put it back in the bag and never look at it again. So it can sit there and just get worse and worse and worse, and you hate it even more. But what you can do is recognise that mistakes happen for everybody. I drop stitches, I knit the wrong stitch by mistake on a row, I do things wrong, I knit a whole row of ribbing and realise that I've gone completely wrong. The knit stitch is a purl stitch where the purl stitch is supposed to be a knit stitch, and it's just completely wrong. I'm going to make mistakes too, and I've been knitting for 40 years, so it is a rite of passage. If you're learning something new, or if you're just doing something and you're not focusing on it enough, then you will make mistakes in your knitting. I don't think there's any knitter ever who has not made a mistake or just had something go wrong without realising it. It's not purposeful, it's not your fault, it just happens. So recognise that you're not alone. These happen to everybody, it's a rite of passage, and you will get through them. Also recognise that by fixing a mistake, you're understanding your knitting more. You're understanding how the stitches work together, how they work alone, how when you knit more rows, then other things happen along your knitting. You might get a new texture because of one thing or another. So you can understand your knitting more effectively, and then you will make fewer mistakes, and when you make more mistakes, then it will be easier to fix them. So recognise that in yourself, in your knitting, that by fixing mistakes, you're actually becoming a better knitter. So there are a few things you can do also with your mindset, with recognising what's around you, your environment, to say, actually, I'm not going to make any mistakes, or I'm going to make a lot fewer mistakes because of how I'm positioning myself when I knit. First of all, you can knit new things, exciting things, challenging things when you're not distracted. If you're picking up a new pattern, you need to focus on it. Don't do it while your children are coming up to you constantly saying, help me with the Lego, I don't understand what's going on, or we're arguing, can you sort it out? Find yourself a space, a calm, quiet space where you can knit by yourself. Only do knitting while you're watching Netflix if it's easy. If you can kind of focus half on your knitting and half on the television, and doesn't really matter whether you're making a knit stitch or a purl stitch. I love knitting garter stitch scarves when I'm watching Netflix. I love doing things like moss stitch when I'm watching Netflix because I find them easy, they're simple to do, and it's a really great way of getting through the evening and seeing my knitting grow and progress over the evening. And that is all about recognising your strengths and your weaknesses, and when your knitting is a challenge and when it's not. So that's a big part of your environment. Is your environment set up for you to knit easily, or is it set up for you to knit with lots of challenges? And so you can focus on your knitting and say, I'm going to do this really well, it's going to be a lot easier for me, I'm going to make a lot fewer mistakes. When you're starting a new challenge, when you're starting new techniques, try and knit something that isn't so dependent on size, because that's just one more variable that you really don't need when you're knitting. If you're knitting something you've never used lace knitting before, and suddenly you decide, I'm going to knit myself a summer sweater with these new lace techniques, it has to be not only that the lace knitting works well. You understand all these new stitches, all the new abbreviations, but also it has to be the right size, it has to be the right shape, the length has to be correct, everything has to work right, but you're learning all these new techniques as well. That went majorly wrong with me when I started cable knitting. I thought, oh, that's perfect, I'm going to knit a cable jumper. I've never done cable knitting before, but I'm going to knit a cable jumper. And it took me so long to knit through that first piece and also figure out the shaping while I was going. And then I eventually said, this is really lovely, I'm so proud of what I've done, but to knit more cabling on the front, the sleeve, the collar, and get all the way through the sweater, it was just far too much. So I said, I really love this. I'm going to be so proud of this. I made it into a cushion cover and I am using it to this day. 20 years ago I knitted that and I'm still using that. So it means something to me now, but it would have been a lot easier if I just sat myself down and said, why don't you just knit a cushion cover? Because then I would have felt that it was a lot easier for me to knit and it would have felt a lot more doable. So, knit something where the variables are not there to interrupt and to make mistakes for you, and you're not under so much pressure to get it right constantly. Size doesn't have to be relevant. You can knit a hat. It can kind of fit you. It can be a bit small, it can be a bit big. It doesn't really matter. A hat is a hat is a hat. Usually it's a one size hat, and if you knit it up with the right yarn and with the right needles, it will likely fit you. So there's no knitting police going to measure it and say, that was supposed to be 21 inches, but you've made it 20 inches diameter. That's not good enough. It will still fit you, you'll still wear it, and it will still keep you cosy. So knit something in the new techniques so that you won't make so many mistakes and there aren't so many chances for you to make mistakes. And I have already just mentioned this, make sure that you're using the right yarn and the right needles. At very least, use a substitute yarn that fits the yarn that the designer suggested. Then you're not going to make mistakes as well. Those variables are out of reach as well. You haven't got to worry about that. All you have to do is sit down and knit and go, all I'm focusing on is my stitches and what the pattern says. And that's that. Simple. Okay, so that's your mistake fixing mindset. Let's recognise that other people make mistakes as well when they're knitting. Other people make mistakes in life too. That's just what life is. We're going along a journey. And when you make mistakes, then you will progress in your knitting faster. You will learn more about the knitting. You will learn more about how you fix mistakes. So you will learn more about how this knitting works. Then I would say make sure that your environment's right when you're knitting. Make sure if you're doing something new and challenging that you have a bit of peace and quiet, that there's calm around you and that you can focus on what you're doing. And of course, cut out the variables that will just make it more complicated and make mistakes more likely, and that will make it more difficult for you to fix those mistakes as well. If you're learning new techniques, don't add in complicated shaping and large pieces where you need to sew them all together at the end and it all has to fit correctly. Just make sure that it's a lot easier for you as you go along. So, mistake fixing mindset set. How about you come along and join me for a confidence workshop? Do you want to become a confident knitter? This is a confident knitting workshop for beginners. I'd love to help you. If you feel like a beginner knitter, that might be that you've been knitting for a few months or a few years, but you've only just been reaching out and saying, I fancy doing a bit more than the knit stitch and the purl stitch. I want to add a bit of shaping and just feel confident as I keep moving. Maybe you have only been knitting for a couple of weeks and you really want to get going and start moving with your knitting. Maybe you have been knitting for a bit longer, but you feel that you want your knitting to be faster. When you're knitting interesting shapes, it all goes wrong constantly. So join me for that and we can work out how you can be more confident. I've got 3 steps for you to just move forward in your knitting with more confidence, with fewer mistakes, and with the progress that you want to see. And I'd also like to share with you the 2 benefits of knitting that not many people mention, but I think are really important, because it doesn't just affect your knitting life. Those benefits that you get from knitting affect your whole life as well. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for today. I've got the link for the workshop in the comments below. And that is this Friday. But if you're watching after Friday, January 16th, 2020, do click on the link anyway, you can watch it as a replay. I'd love for you to join me in that. If you're there live, then we can answer Q&A, and of course you can watch the Q&A afterwards as well. I will see you again soon. Bye for now. Let's fix those mistakes. Happy knitting.